Today's guest is Jen Mussari. Jen is a hand letterer and illustrator from Brooklyn. Jen talks about the life of a freelancer, shows us how to get the work we love, finding a mentor, and shares how her environment keeps her inspired. But now let's get to know more about Jen Mussari. Jen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. So excited to be here.
So, Jen, before we continue, I'm going to ask you what I ask all my guests. Pencil or pixel?
I think the answer for me is pretty obvious. It's definitely pencil and lots of them.
Do you have a ton of pencils?
Oh, God, so many. Pencils, lots of pens, lots of brush pens, all sorts of bizarre drawing media, wet drawing media, calligraphy pens. It's crazy. My studio is like overflowing. I have a desk drawer that's just totally full of them, and it's like the most satisfying thing digging through them. It's like digging through a box of Legos when you're a kid. So
Jen, I've given a brief introduction, but tell us more about what you do.
Well, I consider myself an illustrator, but it's interesting hearing what other people consider me as. Sometimes called a designer, sometimes called an artist. It's all over the spectrum, but what I actually do is I draw lettering. I draw custom lettering for a wide variety of super fun clients that I love dearly.
What are some of your most current clients?
Once in a while, I'll get asked a question of like, and I think a lot of other artists and designers get asked this, but what is your dream project? And I'm always like, I don't know. Like, no, who sits around and thinks about like, if I could be doing anything right now for any client, what would I do? And it's totally cool if you do, but I've never done that. Yeah. Until recently, I got an email from an all-girl motorcycle gang, and they were like, hey, we need a logo. And I was like, this is my dream project. This is the best thing I could possibly be doing. So I'm finishing up their logo today, and I'm super excited about it. But they're like the coolest ladies ever. There's 70 women who just like ride classic cars and motorcycles all over Brooklyn, and they're like the coolest ladies.
Oh my gosh! So they're local. They're from Brooklyn.
Yeah, they are local. I met a couple of them at a garage event at a Union Garage, which is in my neighborhood. It's like down the street. Wonderful people. My favorite local business ever. And then I met this lady and started following her on Instagram and noticed she was like hanging out with all these other ladies, and they started using the hashtag the Misfires. And I was just like, oh my God, these ladies are so cool. And then they finally contacted me to do their logo, and I'm like super stoked about it.
What made you decide to get into illustration and even more specifically into lettering or drawing letters?
I feel like it's kind of a cop-out to say it's something that I've always done, but it's true. It's like, obviously, I've always been drawing. I think a lot of creative people have always been drawing or making in some way, making sculptures, doodling on notebooks. So in high school, I really got into putting my work online, which this was like 2001 to 2003-ish, like a little bit past and before. I started putting my work online, and I was just like getting all this feedback from people all over the world, which was really crazy for me. And that's kind of when I realized like, oh my God, there's art schools out there that I can go to and like become a professional in this. And my parents weren't super convinced, but I definitely was. So when I started drawing words specifically, it just really kind of hit something for me. And I became totally addicted to making the letter forms look more real and perfect and how they should, but becoming like having more fun with the textures and construction of it as well. And then I got into calligraphy in college, and I started taking actual typography courses and lettering courses from some really amazing teachers that I totally credit for the addiction that I now have for drawing letters. People like Post Typography and Joel Holland I got to take classes from in Baltimore, and it was the best thing that could have happened to me. So getting out of college, it was just natural for me, and then a couple years later, this whole hand lettering trend became such a thing. And I'm just kind of excited and happy to be in the right place at the right time. And clients need need some hand-drawn love in their work.
Definitely. Right out of college, did you immediately land work in lettering or illustration, or how did you transition into, I guess you could say, into the workforce?
It was hard, actually. In illustration, there's this thing, and maybe in design as well, but we always talked about it in my illustration department in college, called the first 4 years, which is basically like the first 4 years really suck and are really hard and are really terrible. And I just hit the 4 year mark of being out of college, and it actually feels like I had to do that time in order to get to a successful freelance situation where I am right now, which is like bizarre to me. So I was like, well, that's bullshit. Like, if I just work really hard and talk to the right people, I can do this in 2 years, which is totally not true. 2 years out of school, I was like just leaving San Francisco, and I was like super discouraged because San Francisco just didn't give me anything. It was really weird. I moved to Brooklyn and immediately felt like I was where I needed to be to create a freelance career. And since then, it's just been really wonderful. I've had a lot of local clients, which has been great. But I landed a job right out of school that was really big. It was the cover for Amos Lee's release called Mission Bell, and he's actually a artist from Philadelphia, a musical artist. I'm from Philadelphia, and ironically, his actual last name, because Amos Lee isn't his real name, hopefully he doesn't hear me say that, is my last name, but with an O at the end, which is really bizarre. So it was like fate in a weird way. And it was a mix of illustration and lettering, which is one of my favorite things to do because I have now an entire composition to work with, which is really exciting. Oftentimes I'll get hired to do just a lettering piece. Maybe it'll sit as a logo or be like a highlight piece for a web page or be printed on a tote bag or whatever. But when I get to work with illustration and lettering together, it's always really exciting because the composition can become so much more complicated and a little bit more involved.
Super cool. So when you produced that for Amos Lee, was this when you were in San Francisco?
This was when I was in San Francisco, and it was one of the few jobs that I got while I was out there, and it was for a New York client, so I had to work with the time zone differences, which is really bizarre. I don't want to say that there aren't clients in San Francisco who I could have worked with at that point, but I had a really hard time finding and connecting with them. And I don't know if it's about the personality differences between the types of people that are working in Brooklyn versus San Francisco, but I just meshed so much better with the people that I found in Brooklyn to work with.
What was it that made you decide to make the move to Brooklyn?
Oh man, I was so fed up with San Francisco at that point. It was bad. I think it was 2012 at that point, and tech is still everywhere, but I feel like it's at a point now that's just crazy, even over the past 2 years. And at that point, it was just becoming so suffocating that I really couldn't find anyone to connect with. You couldn't go to a cafe and not hear a pitch. It was just like exhausting to me. And I'm from the East Coast. I'm from Philadelphia originally. My little sister lives in Manhattan. She lives in the Lower East Side. And every single time I came to New York, I was just like, this feels so good. This is great. I love it here. It's kind of hard to be here. It's like it makes you tough in a weird way. Like you have to deal with so much stuff every day, so many inconveniences. And that's what I like. San Francisco was weirdly easy for me, aside from the fact that I couldn't start my career there. Living there, just like the food's great, the weather's awesome, everyone's so easygoing. It was almost too easy. So Brooklyn presented a challenge, and I took it.
So sort of leads me to the next question. So you work at Studio Mates, and which is in Dumbo, and for those who don't know, Dumbo stands for down under the Manhattan overpass, right?
Bridge overpass.
Bridge over. Yeah, that's right. So you work in Dumbo. How has that influenced your work? How has it influenced your your career?
Dumbo's been awesome. I think Dumbo gets a lot of flack actually now, especially because of the tech scene.
Yeah.
But after living in San Francisco and seeing the kind of bubble that exists there, I can't say that Dumbo will ever be like that, I hope. Even though there's a ton of huge startups there, and there is so much startup energy there and money also. It's extremely expensive to be there. It's extremely expensive to rent there, to eat there, to do anything in that neighborhood. It's even like hard to get to. There's one train that goes there, so it's like, it's not ideal for an illustrator at all. There's a studio very much like Studio Mates up in Greenpoint, which is very artist friendly, called Pencil Factory.
Pencil Factory?
Yeah, Pencil Factory. Best place, best people, so many wonderful people there. But for me, there's something about being surrounded by people that don't do the same work as me that really gets me going. And also, this is kind of one of my secrets, but the people that I'm surrounded by are my clients too. Because I'm not surrounded by people who draw all the time, anytime you need to be like, oh, we need some love in this, we need some hand-drawn stuff, I'm like, hey, like, I sit over here. So it's pretty ideal to be surrounded by digital people when you're a handmade type of person, analog, because I can do the things that they can't, and vice versa. So we collaborate all the time. I don't think that there's one person in that studio that I haven't collaborated with, which is really exciting to me. And it's like a big family. We're all friends. It's really wonderful. But then also in Dumbo as a whole, not just outside of our studio, there's so much there that I will get a call from West Elm, who's like down the street, and they're like, hey, Jen, and I'm like, hey, it's so nice to hear from you. They're one of the best clients ever, and they're like, can you come over like tomorrow and draw something in our lobby? And I'm like, yeah, because normally I would say absolutely not. Are you crazy? Tomorrow is like tomorrow. And meanwhile, it's in my neighborhood. It's a place I'm comfortable with. It's so easy to just stop by and like make some extra money, which is really great. So I love Dumbo.
And do what you love.
Yeah, totally. It's hard for me to tell other people to move to Dumbo or try to move their business to Dumbo, but I do think that it is ideal if you can to be here.
That's so cool. I want to ask you about freelance. So you recently made the jump into a freelance career, right? So I wanted to ask you if there are any practical steps that you took before going freelance, and what would you advise to someone who would like to do the same thing?
Yeah, I'm not a risk taker at all. I think I really admire people who say, quit your job and just do it. But I just can't do that. So I've had a part-time job, at least a part-time job, my entire time since being out of school. And I was always doing freelance work on the side, but it really felt like having almost 2 full-time jobs, really, because everything takes up so much energy.
Absolutely.
So I had freelance experience. I knew how to work with clients. I wasn't like jumping in to the cold, deep end of the pool. I had a support group also, which I think is really important for anyone who's looking to go freelance. And not just like, not financially, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if you have a client and you're having a hard time with it, if you can just like go across the street or turn your swivel chair around and you can see someone who can accept your venting a little bit, that's so valuable. So have some sort of social support group. It's really important. People who've done it before. If you don't necessarily have creative friends, you can totally find lots of them online, which is really great. I love the internet. I love Twitter for that. Yesterday I tweeted something about my first invoice that is coming upon its first anniversary. So I have a year-long invoice now, which still hasn't been paid.
Oh, you mean an outstanding invoice?
Outstanding invoice that is now
for
1
year.
Yep. And I tweeted about it, and everyone was like, like faves like crazy because you identify with that. My friends who are freelancers identify with that, and other illustrators were like, "Oh, I got one that's 9 months old. Blah blah blah. This is crazy. Like, should I use the L word, which is lawyer?" And I'm like, I'll be a little bit nice about it. So I think maybe that energy came forth towards me, and I emailed the client, and they were like, "Oh, I got this. Like, I got this." Of course, I've gotten a lot of emails like that, but I really feel like they're sending out checklists. So it's like getting that positive energy from the internet really helped me with this issue that a lot of freelancers face, which is not getting paid. You kind of have to be able to deal with that. So my other piece of advice would be to have some savings. Definitely, absolutely. If you don't have savings and you don't have work, you're not going to be able to pay rent, especially if you're living in Brooklyn, which is very expensive.
Especially Brooklyn.
Yeah. So have some savings, have a support group, and then also there's just so many digital tools that can really help. Coming out of art school, I had this really DIY mentality that I think now might actually be a little bit harmful to my business, because I'm like, oh, obviously the best way for me to do it is to design my own invoices and design my own invoicing system. And meanwhile, my student mates are like, there's FreshBooks, just use FreshBooks. And I did, and it's so much easier. It saves me so much time. I don't have to pull an invoice into Illustrator and redesign it for every single client ever again. And if you're doing that, stop, because it's a waste of time.
So that's what you were doing before?
Yeah, because that's how they taught us to do it in art school.
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
What? Because they thought, I don't know if it's like an outdated thing, but that's like the only way to get your logo on it, or the only way to make it look like your work. Right, exactly. But FreshBooks does a perfect job, and whatever, it works perfectly for me. Yeah, it tracks all my expenses also. So I would say use FreshBooks. There's an app called Shake also, which I'm not sure. It's gaining a lot of popularity now, but I haven't heard that many people talking about it. But I highly suggest you download it. It's an iPhone app, and basically it's Shake, like a handshake. It's a contracting app, and it's created not just by tech people, but by lawyers also, which I think is really important. This is my cat, Winston. He's really cute.
It's cute.
I know, he's really sweet. So Shake lets you create a contract in like 2 seconds. It basically says, are you a freelancer or are you hiring a freelancer? And obviously I use the freelance tool. But yeah, so Shake, and then obviously my third must-have for freelancers, and not if you're a web designer, but if you're someone like me who doesn't know how to code, my must-have tool is obviously Squarespace. They like are, I feel like they're my BFFs now. They like have shared so much love with me. It's the best, and so I always have to give them a shout out. But my work would not look as professional as it does if I had to try and make my own website, because I just would waste so much time trying to do that. So Squarespace really helps me. It's so easy for me to make a blog post now, which is really important for social media. So it really helps me make my work look good, which is great. So I have to give those 3 tools, FreshBooks, Shake, and Squarespace, like my ultimate high five.
Well, not only did you answer a lot of the questions that I haven't asked yet, but
sorry.
But you're talking about no, it's perfectly great. I love it. This is awesome. But you recently redesigned your website with Squarespace, which looks amazing, by the way. And I also noticed that you're giving them a shout out, but they gave you an ultimate shout out by adding your website to their commercial. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh my God. It gets me all like excited just to talk about it. I still really kind of don't believe it's real, and I think
congratulations, by the way. That's
thanks.
Huge.
I mean, I don't want to brag, but this is huge for me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really excited. And I think it's okay to be excited about that. I have
Absolutely.
to like let it out a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's really crazy to me to think that a company as big and powerful as Squarespace, with all the millions of dollars that they have and hundreds of employees that they have and all the crazy stuff that they do, would think to be like, oh, like, you're cool, you should be on our website. And I'm like, Okay.
Yeah.
So the guys from Squarespace came over. Billy Sweeney is super awesome, and his whole team, as well as Lewis and Dan and Rich and all the amazing people over there. They came over and they were like, "So, your website?" I'm like, "Yeah, thanks so much. Squarespace is really awesome." And they're like, "Yeah, it's like a template that really doesn't work anymore." And this was in the beginning of the year, and I was just like, "Oh, that explains a lot." So once in a while, they stop developing templates and just kind of
Oh.
let them disintegrate. I didn't know that, and I tend to be the person. I've been using Squarespace for 2 years, so I've had the same website for 2 years up until recently. And they were like, "Yeah, so we want to fix that for you," and I was like, "Okay, that sounds great." And they did an amazing job, and it was really exciting, and they make it look so easy. It's really crazy. So I'm super stoked about that. But the fact that now lots of people are seeing it and that it represents a part of the brand that they hold really dear is like very, very humbling and very exciting. And I think until I see the commercial in the real world, I'm still going to be like, is this really happening? So yeah, if you see it or if anyone sees it, please let me know because I still feel like I'm in dreamland.
But it's only a matter of time, and it's gonna be out there in the wild pretty soon. So
Yeah, they actually like sent me a list of the shows that it's going to be aired during, and I'm like, uh, this is all of the shows. This is every show.
wow.
So, yeah, I'm really, really excited to go home and watch Discovery Channel with my dad now.
There you go.
Right.
That's super awesome, Jen. No, seriously, congratulations. That's massive. And then you had work on a previous commercial, which I actually saw during the Super Bowl earlier this year for Chrysler, right?
It was
Or
for the Lincoln Motor Company.
Lincoln, sorry.
Yeah,
Lincoln.
that's fine. Lincoln and Ford have a long history together, so you can understand why Lincoln might get mixed up with like a few other companies. But yeah, that really marked a point in my career that felt like a step up. And I have to credit a little service called Working Not Working for that. Justin and Adam, thank you very much. I had zero interest or desire in getting into advertising. And when I got onto Working Not Working, I realized that this is a gamble, but I might as well give it a shot. And suddenly I started getting contacts from people that I would never have been able to work with on my own. And I don't want to say that they like replace a rep. I've never had a rep. I have no interest in having a rep, but I was thinking about it at that point because I just wasn't getting work that I felt really projected into the world or like projected my career at all. So when I got on Working Not Working and I started getting these little things here and there for ad agencies, I was like, yeah, I see why people do this. This could be good. This is exciting. And suddenly the reach of my work, even though it maybe didn't have my name on it, became really large. And that was really exciting to be creating hand lettering for the world, basically, to see. That's really cool. And so Lincoln contacted me, and I grew up with cars. I love all cars. Well, not all of them. But I love old cars, definitely. All old cars, definitely. And motorcycles as
classics.
well.
You like the classics.
Yeah, classics and antiques. So when Lincoln contacted me and they were interested in doing a iteration on a old piece of video that actually John Contino had worked on, who is the best. He's like the heavy hitter in my industry, and I super respect him. And they were like, yeah, can you work on this thing that John did? And I was like, yeah, that's a huge, huge deal. Thank you. I was super excited. So it was about the heritage of Lincoln, the brand, and I definitely really believe in that. And it's a really interesting story about how this all came out. So the commercial aired during the Grammys, and it aired during the Super Bowl apparently, and then during they expanded it into China and France, and now back into the United States again. So it's airing just on rotation, just so bizarre. And the ad agency themselves were wonderful to work with. And my art director, Kenji, was so excited to be creating something really beautiful, even if it was only like 30 seconds long, which is
Yeah.
so bizarre to see. Like, my work was on the television for like 5 seconds.
Yeah, and you know what? It made a huge difference.
Right,
I mean,
but millions of people saw it, which is
yeah,
still mind-blowing to
yeah,
me. And just the fact that the Lincoln Motor Company like actually specifically asked for hand lettering and wanted something that looked handcrafted and loved in the way that their original motors were created. I was like very humbled and very excited by that. And I think it kind of marks a really neat point when a giant company like Lincoln that would be very, sorry, boring, I would think, is like, actually, we want to do something genuinely beautiful and show it to the world in place of something that was just sell a lot of cars.
yeah.
So yeah, I was really excited to work on that, and it turned out very nicely, and I'm very, very excited.
Yeah, I guess they wanted to show the craftsmanship, you know. I might have seen it during the Grammys. I'm not sure. I'm probably
Maybe
confusing it with the Super Bowl. I don't know. Let's just say the Super Bowl for now.
one of those big events.
One of those huge events. Earlier you mentioned, and I want to ask you about this. Ask if you could maybe give us a little more, not information, but a little more insight as to what you meant by getting, suggesting for people for freelancers or anyone really to be a part of a support group. What kind of steps can someone take to, I don't know, build a support group, or how can they reach out to people?
Well, I know it's so intangible. It's really hard to give someone steps to do that because everyone connects to people in a different way. But what worked for me was going to conferences was really wonderful for me. Design conferences, even though I don't consider myself a designer, a graphic designer, or a web designer, which is generally the conferences that I was going to, places like Weapons of Mass Creation and Brooklyn Beta and the late Build Conference, which is now grown into Break, which I'm very excited for, and I think it's going to be really wonderful. I'm going to the Illustrators Conference, Icon 8, next week, actually, in Portland. So if you go to a conference, you pay some money up front. You have to just kind of do it. I was never that type of person who would be like, oh, like $300, yeah, no problem. Like, that's a lot of money for me in my business at that point. So it's kind of hard to part with at first, but what you get out of it is worth so much more than that ticket price. So go to a conference and be honest and friendly and open in talking to the people around you, all of them, because all of them are interesting. It's so worth doing. It's really just the best place. Then these people are all digital people, which is really great. Not all illustrators are on Twitter or on Instagram or Facebook. Illustrators are not as in front of their computer all the time in the way that graphic designers are, which is why I think Twitter is really popular for graphic designers. So get on Twitter if you're not already. I mean, I can't stress how important Twitter has been for my career, which is really bizarre, and my livelihood, just like being happy and being able to connect with people. I'm somewhat of an introvert, so being near them in person is exhausting at a certain point. So Twitter's great because I can connect without having to be near them, which is really wonderful. And it's just the easiest way to ask for help. If you are coming upon an issue with a client, or you need some feedback on some work, or you're not sure if you should take that job, if you can just shout it to the void, and even if you have like 100 followers or 1,000 followers or 100,000 followers, it doesn't matter. You will hopefully get a response from someone that you've met in person before who cares enough about you to really connect and answer your question, or at least give their advice. So I've definitely used Twitter as my support group before, but I also have a support group in person, which is my studio mates, who are the best. Super fun. If you have one person that you share physical space with, every day, or like me, 20 to 30 to 40 to 50, depending on the day. That's really valuable. And I remember an English teacher of mine once had this like random fact pop into his head that he shared with us, and he was like, it'll make you a better person if you have random contact with a human being 6 times a day. And it's like physical contact, like if you brush someone's hand on the subway, or like bump into someone by accident, or like high five someone or whatever. So ever since high school, that English class, I've been paying attention to that. And it's true. It's like if I stay inside all day and I don't see anyone, by the end of the day, I like don't want to go to sleep, and I'm like kind of crazy, and I don't like want to eat, and things are just not physically right. Yeah. When I'm surrounded by people and I take a walk with them in the day, or just say good morning to someone, that like kind of resets the system and makes sure that everything is how it should be. Which is really weird, but it's something that I've noticed. So a physical support group on top of a digital support group is really wonderful. Just very important. I do think that maybe there are some people who can work in a void, but I think that they're very rare. So if you find yourself being the type of freelancer who works from home, who like only talks to your cat all day, like that can be really dangerous. And it's worth going, even just if it's to Starbucks, or hopefully your local coffee shop if you have one. Just to get out there and like say hey to the barista is really, really important. It's the little things, really.
Awesome. Jen, I'm going to change it up a bit here. I usually ask about a book to everyone. So do you have any book recommendations? Are there any books that you turn to for inspiration?
Oh boy. Well, first off, I'm going to be really boring and say the book that I go to all the time is the Pricing and Ethical Handbook.
Sweet.
Because, yeah,
that seems to be a very popular one here. I'm going to pop it out again.
Yep. There it is.
Yeah. Well, this is an old one. I'm always saying this is an old one, but this is probably my favorite design, actually.
Cover. I have one here. I have one at my studio. I probably have one like at my parents' house. I have one everywhere, and I give it to everyone too. Like I've been working with Tatley lately with like some interesting licensing situations that we're not really sure about. I'm not really sure about. They're not really sure about, and so we just sit down. I put that giant book in the middle of us, and we figure it out, which is really great. But that's super boring. So for actual inspiration, I love magazines. I have always loved magazines. I am super inspired by the Great Discontent magazine that just came out. I actually was very lucky to see some of the creation because it was designed in my studio. By my studio mate Frank, and seeing them like working through the proofs and laying it all out was really amazing. But then to see it in person and flip through this massive book of intense inspiration.
That thing is gigantic, isn't it?
It's huge. It's the best. So Off-Screen Mag is really great too. I love all magazines. Not like tabloids or whatever. Though.
No, of course.
So,
right here actually.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Totally. But not just fine art magazines too, like W and fashion magazines are really cool.
Yeah.
And then that goes down to small publications and zines as well.
Ooh.
So illustrators love making zines, and it's like the coolest, most fun thing to trade when you have get a bunch of illustrators together, which I'm really excited for next week at Icon. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of awesome tiny publications coming out.
Yeah, definitely.
So zines, magazines, and then fine art books, obviously. I have so many here. There's like, this one is probably one of my favorites ever.
Wow.
Just copper paintings, and then I have, oh, this one's really cool. This is a first edition Wonder Woman book. See, it's like in a plastic.
That is so cool.
Case. So it has all of the old Wonder Woman comics in it. Let me just open up so that you can see some of these.
Wow.
Because they are just like so weird.
That's so
and
cool.
awesome. Like the way that they draw her is just so cool and inspiring. But and then anything by Ray Fenwick, obviously, he's like the wackiest, weirdest, awesome dude. And then Mike Perry puts out a ton of really awesome books as well. But ultimately, I really like just reading in general, and I find that if I find myself looking at too much digital lettering on the computer, like Dribble and Found and all of that stuff, I find myself not making work because I see too much of it. So, and hand lettering is a thing right now. It's such a trend, which is okay, and it comes and goes, which is fine. I think it's maybe something that has always had a presence, even if it's just in calligraphy. But that presence waxes and wanes, and right now it's like really big, which is awesome. But when you see so much of it every single day on the internet, it's everywhere. It's all over Tumblr. It's all over Pinterest. It's all over everything. I find myself unfollowing those Pinterest boards and like stopping to look at things that are not hand lettering, paintings and sculpture, and reading actual books.
How does that stop you? How does it make you feel? The looking at all of this work, there's just tons and tons of stuff out there. I mean, I understand that it's overwhelming, but does it does it set you back?
There's so many talented people in my field. Of course, when I see that, it's a mixture of like go get 'em attitude that comes in, and also a little bit of self-consciousness. For I think any human would feel that, really. But I really try not to see too much hand lettering because it's a little bit exhausting and a little bit intimidating, but ultimately it is the fuel that keeps me going, which is really exciting because I love the craft. I really think that at least handwriting is for everyone, and it should be, and more people should be drawing. That's like my ultimate statement, if there's anything, is that you should draw. If it's letters or something else, that's totally cool. It would be stupid to think like, oh, that person's doing hand lettering now, and that's totally like, because of they've seen work on the internet or whatever. And I'm sure there are people who started doing hand lettering because they've seen other people's work on the internet. And I can't say that that's a bad thing. I think that's pretty cool, that they found something that means something to them in that work. But also, you do have to realize that there's a lot of work that goes into it. And if you're a graphic designer and you just like hand lettering and suddenly you get an inclination that you want to be a hand letterer, it's not like you just flip the switch and then you're good at lettering. It takes years and years and years and so many hours of practice just to make an E look the way it's supposed to look when you draw it by hand. And it's like, it's not just going to magically happen. So you have to be willing to put all that work into it, and oftentimes it's like that the people who are really wonderful at it, like Eric and John, etc., Dan Casaro as well, is because they have like a natural desire and fuel to go and like really attack it, and they've been doing it forever also. So
very true, very true. Jen, before we wrap it up, I wanted to ask you: are there any exciting things you're working on that you could talk about? That you could talk about, of course. Any really cool projects?
Yeah, I'm really excited right now because I did a few big paying projects earlier in the year, so now I'm taking on some fun solo projects, and I'm doing some side projects for friends of mine who are making music, which I'm really excited about.
Sweet.
They are not launched yet, so we'll see what happens in a little bit. I love the music projects. They're really, really fun. And then working on designs for small businesses is really fun to me as well. So working on like just little t-shirt designs for a small company in my neighborhood, which I'm really excited about.
Nice.
So some personal work, which is really, really great for me. I'm shooting a lot of film right now, actually. So like getting way back to my roots when I shot a ton of photos in high school. So I'm going to be playing around with that, see what happens.
Very cool. You've given tons of really, really cool stuff. Really, really useful advice, especially for people that are planning on going freelance, and becoming independent illustrators or designers, artists. But if there's one last piece of advice, one single piece of advice that you give to the illustrator, the designer, the artist, what would that be?
Oh gosh, that's such a big question, and I'm sure you get this response from like everyone as well. It's like, I don't want to be the person to give advice. And I always, whenever I see people giving advice, I'm always the person who's like, okay, but who are you really? I have to respect you a lot to really take your advice just on face value. So I never want to be like, this is the way you should live your life or whatever. So my piece of advice is going to be really vague. It's just going to be like a very, very short little mantra of just like cool your jets. Like relax once in a while. Just take it easy. Take a step back from yourself and your work and your ego and your life, and just kind of calmly assess the situation, and think about the words that you're saying and how that pairs up with how you're actually living your life. So yeah, take it easy, mostly.
Love it. That's great. Jen, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time for being here. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll see you next week.